This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. How's your happierness? Yeah, I had to double take when I first read that word, but it makes perfect sense. Happierness. Are you striving to make the most of every situation? Joining me today is Matt Zinman to chat about what happierness is and how we can find it in our lives. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Lucy. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So you've created a new word there.
Right?
Happierness.
Well, I'm pretty sure every word was not a word until it was a word. So you got to start somewhere.
Well, that's a great, what better word could you start with than something that involves happiness?
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad it's interesting. I've never quite started a conversation, go right into happiness, but it's true. It really is the evolution of a lot of what I've been doing. I'm sure we'll, be getting into that. It's not as much of a derivative of happy or happiness as it is a life skill. And it really is, as you described, it's optimism in the present tense. And that's essentially why I was looking for that word, but optimism is not present. That's about hopefulness. It's future meaning. So that's filling the gap is the goal.
And a lot of people get confused with the word optimism or being, having that mindset because they think it's about, you're happy and there's no problems and everything's great, but it's not exactly that, is it?
Yeah, that's another part of it, which is in terms of life happening and why I put it forth as a life skill in that, yes, I mean, certainly any number of things happen to us on any given day and in our lives overall. And, you have to deal with the real. But at the same time, there is perception on a day-to-day basis and more of the routine things that might come up. Being optimistic or pessimistic apply to the same exact set of circumstances. So while we can't entirely control to a large degree the things that happen to us, we do have the full control over how we react. And so happiness is about that reflex of positivity to really strive as to make the best of every situation. And even when it's the tough stuff, then the only way through is through. Well, what's the best way through? Without cutting corners, right? You're not suppressing sadness and things like that to what you described.
And I think the past, 18 months has been the perfect example of how we can look at a situation and choose to find the silver lining or get stuck in the challenges of it all.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. And, I think a lot of people have gone through adaptability challenges, whether it's being home or whether, the pandemic has really affected people's lives in to a greater degree. It certainly did for me. I essentially changed careers and leaned in to what it is I'm doing now. I was running a nonprofit called the Internship Institute for 15 years that I founded. And there's not a lot of internships happening as things shifted over to virtual, even though that is a specialty of mine. I really had to switch gears, and it just worked out that the way the current was flowing, it had been getting really tough. And when we say internships, we are, by any, apprenticeships and by any other name, work-based learning. And what I deal with was mostly for college students. But my first book, Zisms, came out the exact week that the pandemic shut down everything. And my launch party, my signings,
Oh,
so
everything that you
but
would like.
yeah,
I've sort of dabbled in writing a book, and I shelved it while I launched another business. But it's, when you hit those writer blocks, those moments of struggle, it's picturing, you know, the book launch. It's picturing signing those books. It's all of those good
yeah.
things, and you had that taken away.
I know.
That
The
sucks.
idea of signing the books is, still what I'm looking forward to, at the same time. But, you adapt. But I really had only planned to publish the book. I had a gap, an opportunity in my life to really pose the question, in a sense, what would I regret not doing? And the book came up to the surface, and why I put my head down and got that done over that prior year. But I had fully planned on going back and running my nonprofit as a new grant was coming through. And instead, I've leaned in. I've started my own podcast. I'm in episode in the mid 60s now. So I've certainly done a lot of episodes on that since I launched in late July, and I've developed courses, and now I'm working on a second book. So none of that would have happened hadn't been for the pandemic. So I'm trying to walk the talk, I guess, where Happierness is concerned.
Well, and that's, you have to, I mean, you can't just talk about something. And for me, I find that I can share because of the experiences that I've been through. The best teachers are the people that have actually been through the crap.
Yeah, I mean, all of us have been through everything that we have in our lives, and that really is a foundational concept around something called earned confidence. It's my chapter one, and you can say Zedisms to my friendly neighbors
We were
in
talking about that
Canada.
beforehand,
Yeah, no,
because I'm Canadian, and so I see it and I'm like,
yeah,
how am I going to say that?
it's the same letter. So by any other name, um, but earned confidence is really part of that happiness mindset. And just to back up half a step, you can't have that reflex if you're not present. So it's not just about what we've already described. It's all the things you need to do to remain present to have the reflex in the first place. So earned confidence is the fact that whatever any of us have been through, we're still standing. We've overcome what we have. There are certainly our achievements that are also part of the equation. So we've earned all of that. And what it really underlies is that we're perfectly capable of dealing with whatever happens to us in real time. And so we don't have to put our energy into uncertainties like worrying or related anxiety or making assumptions about things, and we have to catch ourselves when those things happen, and just remember again, just deal with the real as it happens. I mean, there's enough happening in the present than to get caught up in and waste energy in what's not certain to happen.
And that's it, is that when you're referring to being present, it's not worrying about what's could happen in the future, and it's not fretting about what already happened. That's done is done. You can't change that.
Yeah, it's kind of, you can't argue the fact that we're having this conversation, and everything all of us have been through, we've made it, and so we have that full confidence. And the other side of that, Lucy, is what you need to do to release your past, your residual negativity. And I think we can easily go down the list of regrets and resentments and traumas. And no slight to anything that still needs to be worked through, but for that, again, which is unnecessary, that really is in and around self-kindness. And self-kindness in personal development, to me, really stands apart, because when anyone looks to a goal around, I want to feel better about myself, I want to build my confidence or my self-esteem, or certainly in and around self-love, it can be very vague. How do I know I feel less than how I want to about myself, but how do I get from here to there? And self-kindness is, like earned confidence, definitive, because you're either being kind to yourself or you're not. And what we can do in having that be a barometer to treat ourselves well is start out with the buy-in and say, well, why be anything less than kind to myself? And if you can't answer that affirmatively, you already know where to start. But obviously, that's kind of a rhetorical point. But from an ongoing basis, it's not kind to yourself to hold on to resentment. Even if someone doesn't deserve your forgiveness, forgiveness is really about you and letting go. You don't want them to have that one up on you by having that still, stuck in your crawl. So those two things together, self-kindness as certainly letting go of your past, and earned confidence, not getting caught up in future uncertainties, are really two of the main ways to stay present in a happierness mindset.
Yeah, and you touched on something very, very important is forgiveness, both to yourself and to other people. And I think a lot of people have the wrong understanding of what forgiveness is. They think it's about letting the other person off for whatever they did, and it's not. Forgiveness is, you know, releasing whatever happened and, giving yourself the space to grow, because as long as you're holding on to that resentment, that anger, that frustration for whatever happened, that's affecting you. That's not affecting the other person.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And look, we it's we all have the one life to live, and hanging on to or getting sucked into negativity unnecessarily, aside from, life strife, just doesn't serve us well. It's not kind to ourselves. And I know we want to cover a lot of ground here, and certainly there is a lot more depth to the things that I'm bringing up. And, for my purposes, life experience, and I'm very out front about the fact that I've had to contend with depression since my teens. And my dad was bipolar, my mom was depressive. Just I didn't get the best gene pool in that regard, and I lost my brother in 2012 to suicide. And so I am an advocate in and around depression, but certainly self kindness takes on a much different level for me, as anyone who's gone through any level of depression. I think most people have. We easily, get caught up in our heads, and that has a lot to do with, being very unkind to ourselves. So to me, that barometer of knowing whether I am or I'm not is kind of a safeguard for me to, stay healthy.
Yeah, I've certainly had my own battles with depression. Again, I mean, easily on and off since my teens. And, there were periods of time. There was a period of about 5 or 6 years, I think it was, that I was on antidepressants, which was kind of a band aid because it kind of made me feel okay, but I wasn't actually dealing with things. I wasn't getting to the root of what was causing me the problem. So I really had to go through an entire process of, coming off of the medication and really digging down and understanding myself. And that self kindness piece is so important because I realized that I had spent way too much time beating myself up for even the littlest of things. I wasn't even,
Right.
I wasn't being kind to myself. I wasn't forgiving myself, and I wasn't giving myself any grace.
Yeah, precisely. And, what we've talked about so far is really the big stuff, right? Your past baggage and, how do you defeat worry and anxiety. but we do have those day-to-day habits, and just those just the way we're programmed, through our lives. And at any given time, again, this being the third element about how you stay present. And I think really the toughest one is because you can't be perfect at this, right? But on any given day, when you realize like you keep rehashing something more routine, right? It could have been a conversation. It could, that already happened. It could be something that you're not like worried about, but you're overthinking. If you're not problem solving, if you're not being productive, those are also the kinds of things you need to work on in order just to be present, right? I mean, obviously, now is the only time life is actually happening, and yet, and I'm guilty of this too. I think we all struggle to stay present, and that's where the life skill comes in. You just have to keep working at it.
It is. It's somewhat of a muscle that you have to exercise because it isn't natural because our brains seem to be wired to look for the negative, to look for the problems, to be concerned because and I'm sure it goes back to the caveman days when we had to make sure that we could take care of our our food or escape crazy ass animals or stuff like that. So it is such a it's a hard muscle to start to develop.
Yeah, I
But
honestly think it's the most important
it
among
is.
just foundationally, for self improvement.
Oh, it is. You have to really the first steps is loving and appreciating yourself and all your unique gifts, but loving yourself exactly as you are today.
It's kind of be self accepting, to say the
Yeah.
least. And what's great about where we are right now in terms of what we've covered so far in and around self kindness, leaving baggage behind, earn confidence, helping you stay present, and also that self awareness around your, those negative thoughts that you have to keep working at. Well, now you can have that positivity reflex, but more than that, once you're present, that's when you can push forward. That's when you can start getting into practicing mindfulness and proactively be present, where the enriching experiences of life happen. And then within mindfulness, I think certainly very well known, gratitude being at the heart
Oh,
of
yeah.
that, and all the gratitude practices. And so that's what, doing those first things to make uh the foundation, put the foundation there for yourself around presence. Then you can continue to grow around the things that bring you the most joy.
Yeah, and I remember when, gratitude was all the rage. I'm going to say it was what, 7, 8 years ago was really when it started to become, more mainstream. I can remember trying to practice gratitude and trying to do those things and it just didn't come easily. It didn't work for me because I hadn't started off with that kindness and self-love and that sort of frame of mind. So it
Right.
makes the other things very challenging. What are some other ways that we can become more mindful and practice mindfulness?
I think I like to stick with gratitude for just a moment, and to say that the things we're describing don't necessarily have to happen in a linear way. You could be your gratitude practices are going to help with everything else. And to me, what works is folding it into my day instead of it being just kind of that extra thing. And also recognizing that it's more than, oh, this homework assignment I give myself to just, oh, what are my three things I'm grateful for, whether I do that morning or night, to make sure I experience that, to have it really sink in and the feelings. But I look for uh, kind of downtime, when honestly, and it kind of sounds mundane, personally, but when I'm in the shower, I brush my teeth, I have a spin brush, I have 2 minutes to mindlessly do that. And I intentionally spend that time focusing on gratitude and thinking about my day. I have those 2 minutes. Same thing, with with when I decide I set my alerts 4 times through the day, just make sure I get up and stretch and, not get too caught up. And, that's just energy management, which is another, facet that I'd love to get into for a minute or two. But the thing with gratitude, again, is it has to be practical. It has to be experienced. It shouldn't feel like a chore. And then I've gotten a lot better for myself. I'm doing a program where I've like shifted the paradigm of my well-being coming first ahead of trying to fit a workout in a busy day. So I'm doing morning walks, I'm working out. And so my morning walks, I had someone on my podcast named Andrew Cap who wrote a book on the law of attraction. And one of the things that he spoke to that I've been doing, I found really helpful is cutting up index cards and writing down 3 things from my past for which I'm grateful, 3 things that are in the now, or not, I'm sorry, 5 things that are in the now, and then also 5 things that are future thinking in and around law of attraction that you want to manifest. And then you shuffle the cards. And so while I'm walking, I don't do it every day, but I do it most days. The back end of the walk, I'll reach my pocket, I'll shuffle the cards, and I'll go through them because I'm walking already. And so it's not something extra to do. And it's just a nice way to get focused and to experience that at the beginning of my day. So I just want to share the practical tips along the way here.
Yeah, well, you mentioned energy management. What do you mean by that?
Well, to me, there are a couple facets. There's personal, interpersonal, and universal. Um, Personal is more on the practical entrepreneurial side. Some of what I just mentioned, to make sure that you don't put your head down for 3 hours and exhaust yourself, and that I really try and manage my days based on my energy and my mental acuity, and aligning, like when I'm really sharp, I'll do my writing or my finances. And when I'm sitting here trying to write a cohesive sentence for 30 minutes, it's time to get up and go do laundry, and just really just train myself to be productive in that way. Interpersonal is a whole different aspect and essential day to day, which is to recognize in being, again, present and energy conscious, that we affect one another, that we have a personal responsibility not to bring our bad mood to someone else's day, for example, as well as to be aware when we encounter other people, whether those close to us or just some routine, a restaurant server who's got some kind of attitude, not to absorb that negativity. Because if you ever wonder, you were in a good mood and 3 minutes after encountering someone like that, you're suddenly less than happy about it, you fell into the trap of absorbing their negative energy. So that's part of that energy awareness. And again, why being present is so important, because otherwise, if you're not being energy conscious, you're kind of randomly just being impacted and impacting others with energy. And then universal certainly elevates up into, and it's not for everyone, but those who are inclined to believe in law of attraction and manifestation and really positive psychology, by any other name, whatever that is to you, is that whole category of energy consciousness.
Yeah, and you mentioned about how our energy affects other people, and the easiest way to sort of relate that to something is that when somebody comes in, or you go into a room and somebody's, not in the best of moods, you kind of feel like you're walking on eggshells because you don't want to, upset anyone or trigger somebody. I think we froze.
We
I
froze
think my
there.
internet went a little squirrely
It's
there.
okay. So what I heard last was not in the best of moods.
Yeah. So, when you enter a room or somebody enters a room and you can feel their energy, it's off.
Right.
You feel like you're kind of walking on eggshells because you don't want to trigger that person.
Well, better yet, walking into a room, being fully present and energy conscious, to be aware of those individuals and not necessarily feeling like you're on eggshells. And because when you're conscious of that, maybe you then also have the opportunity, kind of a pay it forward thing, to cheer them up. So like when my son Jake and I are in a restaurant, and I was a single dad for many years. I mean, I'm very happily remarried now, but I'm not, I'm a better cook today. But in those years, we were out a lot. And that's why the restaurant server example comes so quickly. And Jake and I would make a conscious effort to, maybe make fun of one another or whatever it took to make someone who we noticed wasn't having the best day, to get them to laugh or smile or whatever. And that, that makes us feel good. So, that's just part of that consciousness. And I guess the last part, Lucy, I want to make sure that I get in and around the whole happiness mindset, then gets into everything around your why, your purpose, aligning your passion and your self-belief in the things that you want to achieve. And that's there's a whole chapter in Z-isms around something called inevitability, which speaks to this, which is too much for us to get into here. I mean, we can't talk about it all, but I really think we've done a great job here in a compact way of really touching upon most of the main points that go into having that positivity reflex, and being able to be mindful and present, to experience the best of life consciously.
And that's all we're trying to do. All of us. We're all just trying to live our best lives. I don't think anyone's out there going, man, I want to live the shittiest life I possibly can.
Right. But
But
unfortunately, it's random for a lot of people. I mean,
yeah,
how many people are really trying to build this muscle you described?
you know, for me, it was a case of realizing that there was a muscle there to be exercised. And that didn't happen until my mid 40s. As sad and as crazy as that is I was a little bit of a slow learner, but once I got it, that's it. You
Right. It
know,
kind of it clicks
sky's
in.
the limit. Sky is the limit. In fact, no, there is no limit.
Right. And once you're there, I mean, obviously it doesn't stop. We're talking about continuous improvement, but that also means greater and greater enrichment. And I really think that's, look, we all have our daily lives, we all have our pressures, and our times where, our kids or anyone else can make our eyes cross. But at the same time, we kind of have that reflex and ability, that elasticity to bounce back and really come back into that groundedness of being present. And another thing is, if you have a hard time doing it, plant your feet and just pause. And it's kind of a gratitude thing as well, but experience what it's like to have the full weight of yourself. What does gravity feel like underneath you? That's a really good way to get into that space, and uh, especially in a room full of people.
Definitely, definitely. Now, Matt, you've shared a wealth of information today. Where can people connect with you and get a copy of your book? I'm going to say it right. Zism.
Yeah, well, same letter. You could say Zedisms if whatever
Well, I
floats your.
did grow up watching Sesame Street, so I did call it Z for the longest while. So
Oh, it's funny. I have a whole other anecdote about that. Well, thank you, Lucy. My website is mattzinman.com. I certainly hope that people explore it to find a lot of the free resources that are there. I've got a video series that speaks to this about 3 Zisms for a better life. I certainly have a whole set of resources around mood health, something called a depression defeater, all free to download, self-care report card free to download, and certainly access to the book. But as I mentioned, I also have elevated into developing a course, and I'm super proud of it. Probably the proudest accomplishment of my life, quite honestly, to where I am right now, in and around what's called the Z-isms Life Upgrade, 29 days to Happierness. And it's about an hour a day and takes you through these various things that we talked about, obviously, and much greater. And if I may, I want to offer a gift code that gives someone $100 off, which is DD100. And I'll also dedicate another $100 to the Defeating Depression Club, which I run on Clubhouse as I continue to build that club out. So I'm trying to make the most impact as possible. And look, we're talking about self-improvement junkies for sure, but I think honestly, professional women, 30 and over, are really, I think, the main, not the stereotype, but if, from a marketing standpoint, who's going to identify with this most. I think that that's who it's going to help the most.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that generous offer. And if you're listening and you're looking at connecting with Matt, make sure you're checking out the show notes. I'm going to have all of the links in there. And Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
This has been great. Thanks so much for having me, Lucy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Roller coaster.